Anybody who's listening right now is like, okay, what did I just join?
WordPress 5. WordPress 5.
We've got like 4 inside jokes.
Oh my gosh. What's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker. This is WPwatercooler, episode number 313. Today's topic, we actually have a topic today. And
what?
Is inheriting code on a new WordPress project.
Like from a deceased relative, or?
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes. That's real,
George Stephanus, start us off. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Doris Ponce. I work on the Jetpack team at Automattic for the last 6 years, and I get to do hiring and interviews and all sorts of random hijing.
Email George. With your resume.
Say, how about you? Tell us about you.
Who am I, though, really? Who are any of us? I
Jean Valjean?
We are all Jean Valjean. We are many. He is one. I don't know.
Spartacus.
It's anyway, it's D&D.
Diner Lobster.
My name is Say Reed, and I do stuff with WordPress all the time. Teach WordPress, make WordPress, preach WordPress, sleep WordPress, eat WordPress.
Wait, sleep WordPress?
On all the things.
Yeah, because I have like a bunch of WordPress t-shirts that I sleep in.
I'm Say Reed on all the things.
I'm Say Reed on all the things, blah, blah, blah. Okay, go, Steve. You're good.
Steve, how about you? Tell us about yourself.
I am Steve Zengin. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive. I run the OC WordPress meetup. And I'm also in the organizing committee for OC WordCamp, which is coming up April 27th.
Woohoo! Cosper, how about you?
Hey everybody, Jason Cosper, aka the Human Blink Tag. How's it going? AKA Fat Mullenweg. What's up? Happy to be here. Just looking forward to having this conversation today.
Me too.
Awesome.
It's gonna be
me too. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website, jasontucker.blog. I do this show and WP Blab. We didn't do a WP Blab this week, and we're probably not going to do it next week as well. Sorry,
Blab,
Bridget, you're hearing about this right now, but this is how things happen. So
is that like Bob Log Blob?
Bob
last night.
Blog.
Yes.
Oh man. So yeah, let's talk about inheriting code from somebody else. Build a website. You've bidded on it. You are able to do that website. Yeah, and now you have the code. And
you got the bid.
Oh crud. So this person did X, Y, and Z on this code. What do I need to do here? So let's talk a little bit about that and kind of what should you do? Do you start from scratch? Do you take what they're using and just kind of run with it?
I have so much to say on both sides of this topic.
It depends.
I want to know.
Yes. So the first thing you do is say, I will charge you X dollars to do discovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can give you a quote based on that. And if you want to go with me, great. And I would build the thing out for you. If you don't, then you've got this discovery document you can take to anyone else and they can give you a better estimate than they could without it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
We're done. That's it.
All right, that's it. And what do you do during discovery, George?
You take a look at all the plugins that are installed. Make sure no one has hacked cores or plugins. The things can be updated frequently.
You count the number of slider plugins.
Licenses for any plugins, so you can get updates if you need to. You can for the low price.
You passive-aggressively tweet about how bad the install is. I mean, that's just what I do.
Clients from hell.
So, say you bring up a good point.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I know. It took 313 episodes.
I've had a couple.
Jason, can you look back and tell us which episode that was?
No problem. Give me about 30 minutes.
That one episode.
But you bring up a good point, right? So one of the things, let's put tech aside for a second. When I inherit code, one of the things I make sure I do is never disparage the person I inherited code from, right?
That's so important.
Publicly, privately, to the client, right? I don't know what happened prior to me inheriting the code, right? I don't know that the developer necessarily made the decisions that were there in the code.
Oh my God.
I don't know if the client forced those decisions. I don't know if the developer inherited the code from a prior developer before them, right? You have no idea what happened. So don't disparage anybody when you inherit code. It just is.
This is so important. And this is what I was going to say about being on both sides of this, because I have clients who I did, custom devs for when in like 2013, like that's literally 6 years ago, and they're still up and running. And, you know, I know, you know, if they're redoing those things now, I'm like, you cannot compare the 2013 code to what is happening now. Like that's literally like light years away, and you don't know why that developer left. You know, I just wanted to say a real quick story about this. I want a client that, you know, did custom stuff for, love this client, was, you know, their site's increasing. They, you know, they're need to be online all the time. And, you know, they were on shared hosting. And it started to be where they would like, you know, call me if there were hosting issues. And I'm like, so FYI, I'm not a hosting company. I'm not on call 24 hours. I can't help you with this stuff. We need to move, and your site needs to be up. You need more attention than what you have for your technical setup. So I was like, you need to move to WP Engine. WP Engine is great. It's exactly what you need. You'll be up. It's a little bit more expensive. You have support, blah, 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 blah. They do the upgrades and the backups, all this fun stuff.
You just said the E word.
Which one?
Expensive.
No, I mean, yeah, right. Okay. So, you know, comparatively though, right? And this was back when WP Engine had like, didn't have the $29 plan or whatever. So they were, you know, like double. It was just when managed hosting.
I meant the
It's 10 HostGators, okay, guys? Just so you know, it's 10 HostGators.
It's 10 GoDaddies on your intro.
That is a hell of a metric.
It is funny. But so I'm like, here's my recommendation. This is what it would take to move this to that, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. This is going to be great for you. And their response to me was, I Googled this and I looked. Some people on the internet are saying that WP Engine is too expensive and not worth it. And to which I said, great, you should ask them to help you. It's been great working with you, and I have to go now.
That is awesome, right? And so one of the things I was going to say, to tie that back into George's comment about discovery, right? What you just said and discovery, those are great weed out processes for client, right?
Well, I mean, they were already my client, but that was the reason that I left, and the code stayed on a subpar thing. It was so much that needed to be updated. And I was just like, if you are going to question my knowledge about something so simple as a hosting company,
totally,
because of people on the internet that you don't know, that means you have no respect for my opinion, no trust in what I'm recommending to you. And why would you trust anything else that I say ever?
And that's great. And I'm specifically talking about cost, right? So if somebody is not willing to pay $100 a month, right, for decent hosting, right, or it's $115 now, right? And if they're not willing to pay your discovery bill, it's not going to be a good engagement for you. It's not going to be a good relationship, because anytime I'm inheriting code, I don't think I've ever inherited code where it hasn't become a larger project than what the client expected. It is a large project when you're inheriting code, because you're going to make it yours, right? And there is a process that's involved in that, right? Whether you're refactoring or you're redoing, it's going to be more expensive than what the client has in their mind.
Well, because in the client's mind, you know, they've already built the site, and so they're just like taking their car to get an oil change, or, you know, like update the software or something. They're not like thinking, oh, I need a new transmission. Where you might be like, hey, this actually has been recalled, and, you know, you have to take it out.
And so if the client comes to you and they've already built the site, they've already spent this money, right? And they figure it's just a maintenance project or an oil change, how do you handle that conversation?
Bye. No.
That's not true.
No, what I've started to do, you know, and what I do kind of recurringly is I collect, there's people out there who are willing to be just like technicians. They'll go in and do exactly what the client wants on top of whatever's existing there. And I, you know, basically at this point funnel to those people, because I won't do that anymore. I'm not going to fix a broken system. I refuse. It's no longer happening.
So here's what I do. I get into the conversation of short-term and long-term, right? You can spend, you know, some now, right, to have a much better long-term experience, right? We can put some things in place which makes maintenance easier. It makes the site run smoother. It's just going to make the site more future-proof, right? Or you can not do those things and spend down the road, right? And it over time, it's a lot more, in my experience, it's a lot more if you spend over time than put in the effort that you do now.
Do you use a graph?
It's right. Yeah, it's actually right here. It goes up into the right.
This is my graph. It's going to be like this, or it's going to be like this.
Yeah. Either way,
one or the other. do you want? And also,
And this,
you also have to factor in business loss. If the site does go down, the cost of that on top of you still have to fix it if it breaks later.
and this code that we're talking about isn't just if you were to bring on a new client, but also if you went and switched from working at one company to another, and now you're in that company and you own that code. Like, that's not like, and there may be some history behind that code. It may be like Dave Jess used to tell me that when you're going to write this code, you need to make sure that you're writing it for future Jason or future Dave Jess. That was always his thing, was like worrying about the guy that's going to be dealing with this later. And it may be you.
That's
the worst code that you write is the code you wrote 5 minutes ago.
I've bumped into future Steve. He's an asshole.
Yeah, but I mean, think of all you've done to him, the poor guy.
Oh, I get it. No, I understand that I'm part of the problem. I understand.
Future Cosper has a really cool jacket, but he will not tell me where he got it. So angry.
One of the best summaries I've heard, very much along those lines, saying that write your code and document your code as though if you don't do it right, drunk, you will come back and punch in the future.
Oh my Lord.
I hear that.
I mean, so back in the day, I didn't think about future whatever, like long time ago, like
Future say.
That's future say's problem.
And I didn't even think that, but like, I didn't do, you don't necessarily do extensive documentation or whatever. And like that, I think, is really the way to, like, in the code, that is how you can communicate later with people. You're like, this is why I put this here, right here. And the cool thing about that is you're literally talking to the other developers. And if the person isn't in there, it's probably because they're a client and they wouldn't understand it anyway. But the person who comes into the code and is like, oh, this makes sense. I mean, I do that even just like on my CSS files. I'm like, this is what these things are for. Like, it's what it's connected to.
I don't mean to switch subject on you, but we only have
Yes,
17 minutes left, and we've got a lot to cover, right? So I want to talk about some of the things that I look for in discovery. So in that discovery process, as I'm doing a code analysis, one of the first things I'm looking for is best practices, right? So I'm looking for what plugins they're using, what theme they're using. Was it a custom built theme? Is there any custom code? Where was it placed? Is it placed in a plugin? Is it in MU plugins? Is it sitting somewhere it's not supposed to be sitting, right? Is there something sitting in the root folder? Have they made changes to core code, like George said, right? Core WordPress code, core plugins, things like that, right? Look for all those things, but especially in the custom code, when I identify a piece of custom code, I open that up and immediately I'm looking for WordPress best practices.
The problem, again, I just want to reiterate, WordPress best practices in like 2013, 2015, different than WordPress best practices in 2019. So that's where
Absolutely.
Being kind.
But there's a lot of the stuff that is the same.
Absolutely, I think what you're referring to is a matter of how you document that stuff, right? When I document that stuff, I'm not saying, what was this developer thinking? Right? That's not my report. My report is,
you are.
Of course. But my report is these lines of code, these pieces, these functions I found aren't following WordPress best practices.
Or it's just old. It's been depreciated.
They may be.
Have you ever used a function before? Maybe we
They
should maybe we should apply a function here.
The other thing I'm looking for is security best practices, right? Is everything sanitized appropriately? Are you using best practices for getting things in and out of posts and requests and things like that? So, I'm also analyzing for security best practices. The last thing I look at, and this is a biggie, is I install Query Monitor and I'm looking for SQL best practices, slow queries, things that are really slowing the system down. And that's one of the things that, when I inherit a site, when I first am doing a code review, I will put it on a local machine. I'll put it in a sandbox, right? And I'll just see how the site feels, right? Forget Query Monitor for a second, right? Just start going through the site and see how it feels. Is it loading properly? As I'm cruising around, is it running smoothly, right? And then I start to look into Query Monitor to see if there is evidence of slow queries, duplicate queries, PHP errors, all that kind of stuff.
Also, if there are issues, it very well could be the content. Maybe the client didn't use it right. Maybe they didn't understand how it was set up in the first place. And so, you know, something's been going in the wrong spot or being renamed, or they're using, you know, giant images where they're supposed to be, or they, you know, they're putting their own stuff, their own hacks into stuff. So it could be a content, you know, inside the admin issue and not even in the code.
And so one of the things that I do externally to technically for what you're saying is I use something like Pingdom Tools, Google PageSpeed, and I pick a set of pages, right? And I run through all these tools because it'll give you a full report of, you know, are there large scripts that are or are there scripts that are loading slowly? Is there a CDN in place? Or are there images that are just taking up a lot of space? How is the external load happening?
Yeah.
Ugh, so there's so many sites I want to like go back and rebuild. The worst thing is like your old code, and I'm like, oh, I just would have done that differently, or oh, I wish I had technology then, and oh, I don't know. Sometimes it's just frustrating.
And sometimes it's not code that the person wrote, but rather the plugins that they selected that jack it all up. And that was one of the topics. Now that I'm remembering this, Steve, that was one of the topics that we were thinking about, was that whole idea of like using somebody else's code in your website and having that plugin be the thing.
Well, so Jason, I put 3 links in the chat. One is Pingdom Tools, Google PageSpeed, GT Metrics. Between all of those, and there's a lot of crossover there. But one of the things I like in Google PageSpeed is it'll kind of tell you why you're getting the grade you're getting, and pay attention to those things, because it'll tell you, do you need to async your JavaScript? Is there stuff that's loading that doesn't need to be loading? And there's some interesting things that they've done in the Chrome developer tools that'll tell you, you can actually drill down at the page and script level. It'll tell you what scripts are actually not being used and what can be kind of moved off to, you know, later load to start improving those scores. And most of the time, I'd say 8 or 9 times out of 10, that stuff's coming from a plugin. It's being loaded, something's being loaded by a plugin that's just not needed.
You know, the same thing does apply for old plugins, right? There was a plugin that 5 years ago was a great plugin. And, you know, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, it hadn't been updated or whatever, or, you know, maybe it hasn't been updated, but it hasn't been updated in the repository. So you don't know that it's out of date because it doesn't have that plugin you were talking about 2 episodes ago. Go look at that episode if you want that.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you don't even know that plugin is bringing in the bad.
And it related to that, one of the other things I do in a site analysis is I open up the database. I look in PHP My Admin or in another database tool. I look in the database, and what I'm specifically looking for is just like where, if there's bloated tables, but also are there tables that aren't being used anymore, right? Because a lot of times what people do is install plugins and either deactivate them and the tables will stick around, or forget to deactivate them and then just delete the plugin, which makes the tables just sit there, right? So now you've got this bloated database with all the stuff that you don't need. And so I'll actually do a table analysis to see, are these tables actually still being used by active plugins?
Is there a tool you use for that, or is that just manual?
It's right now it's manual. I haven't found.
Oh, I was like, oh, what's that tool?
Yeah.
I want that one. Can I have that one?
That actually takes some. That takes some time.
Yeah, that sounds.
But essentially,
it's not that hard to find out which plugin created a given table.
And it's not. The way I do it is I look at the tables, and I know by now kind of what the Gravity Forms tables look like, what the Yoast tables look like. But if I see one I don't recognize, I will actually copy the name of the table, and I'll go right to the code. I use the code as a source, and I'll search for those table names in the code to see if it even exists. That'll tell me what plugin it comes from.
Unless it's dynamically generated.
What's that?
Can you talk about Lighthouse?
Unless it's dynamically generated. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, Lighthouse is actually an interesting project that Google has started including in Chrome that also, amongst the tools that Steve shared, what Lighthouse does is it basically checks from a mobile standpoint what your performance is like. A lot of people, because they're just developing on their browser, do not think to check how things look on mobile, especially a lot of starting developers, folks who are a little more experienced like Steve and say, I'm sure, at least take the time to load stuff up on their mobile.
I don't know what that is. What?
Yes, it's like a little
file. Is that in Alabama?
Can you have
magical scroll?
Is Future Say around? Can she join the podcast? Sorry, go ahead.
She has a cool jacket too.
Yeah, it's a really cool jacket.
Go ahead, Cosper.
Yeah, so Lighthouse is, they actually have a command line tool. There's also a tool included in Chrome now, in newer versions of Chrome, that will allow you to run Lighthouse reports on any of your domains, on specific pages, etc. So you can get a very deep understanding and insight of like, okay, well, so you have a responsive page, but you're still serving up full-size images on, you know, on the mobile view. Like you can totally trim those down. You should trim those down. You know, things like that. Those little additional insights that PageSpeed, GT metrics, web page test, those things won't necessarily like shake out for you.
What do you do if you?
Real quick, I just want to make a comment. If you're not technical enough to install Lighthouse or use the code, I put another link in there. If you go to Google PageSpeed, there's a link to Lighthouse in there where you can run it inside of Chrome DevTools. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so what do you do when you present all this discovery and you're like, okay, well, you know, these images here, this is here, this code needs to be updated over here. We need to find a new plugin for this, and we recommend, you know, blah blah blah, and it's going to be to fix all this. You know, your transmission costs, for example, are going to be X number of dollars. And they're like, whoa, because you know, sticker shock and all that. Like, if they don't want to or can't pay for all of that at once or at all, do you say, see ya? Do you say, okay, these are the most important things, but we can't be held responsible for this other stuff? Because if that stuff violates your best practice, like, so I have, you know, you were kind of touching on this with the client wanted it in there, or the client dictated, no, this is what I choose. I've been you know, I've had a lot of clients that made choices that weren't my choices. Like, they went against my recommendation. They weren't the best practice, right? And you know, you got to do it. And it's like, you can't just say, okay, bye to every single client who doesn't do everything you want them to do. So what is your method for dealing with that?
Well, I will say sometimes during that conversation, I do like to hit the roof of the website and say, you can fit so many more sales into this baby. You can fit so many more blog posts into this baby. If you just spend the money. And that normally gets me far less pushback, but that's just me. Steve.
My language.
Yeah.
Just hit the hood.
For me,
you got good miles on her.
Yeah. For me, it's more of a conversation, right? It's hey, this is where we stand now. These choices were made before I came along. This is what I'm recommending, and here's why, right? And let's discuss the long-term effects of both ways, right? So I really try to treat the client as a partner, and just have a conversation about what these decisions could ultimately lead to and what the cost savings look like down the road for spending the money now, right? I don't know that there's there's any time I've ever said or thought, look, if you make this decision, we're done here, right? That's not really how it works. It's really more of a communication. And
so would you keep a client on a shared host if they weren't going to move? They didn't want to move. You'd be like, sure, I'll deal with your HostGator site.
No.
Okay, so there is a line. There is a line. We found it.
Well, but I've never had to make that decision. I've always explained the benefits of a shared host.
I need a better persuasion score.
Steve, is it okay if my website runs on PHP 4? Will you make sure that my site stays working on PHP 4?
Now, again, keep in mind at the beginning of this episode, we talked about a weed out process, right? So if there's a client that is insisting that $100 a month is too much for them, right? Or the discovery that we're proposing is too much for them, that's just not our client. So that's why I don't run into these things. I've already weeded them out by that point.
Right. So you brought on clients who are basically like vetted, and they have demonstrated their willingness to respect your professional expertise.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think more what we're looking for is clients that are going to act as partners. No, it's not even pay. It's not even about pay. Yes, I mean that makes sense, but it's really we're weeding out clients that don't want to be in partnerships, right? Because I don't like to be a vendor. Right. When we're a vendor, we sort of that's not a comfortable relationship. And that's sort of the relationship that you're describing.
I think that's really the key, because I think there's a lot of clients out there who view web development as that, as like, you know, a car purchase or whatever, when exactly what you're saying is it's not like that. It's like your accountant more. It's like, you know, it's like that you need to continually check in with and adopt things for, and every year you got to, you know, do your upgrades and your bookkeeping.
Steve,
Not
what
that it's tax time. I'm not thinking about that at all.
what percentage of discovery is the total cost of a project? Like if like on average, like is it 10% of the project? Is it 5% of the project? Is it
on top of the project?
No,
like is it
again, it depends on the project. I mean, I'll give you my discovery cost. You know, our site analysis starts at $2,500, right? So that by itself is a marker, right? There's a lot of clients. Well, there's a lot of clients where their budget for the website is $2,500, right?
But that means that you're not taking that website and putting it on Built With and going, yeah, use WordPress.
No,
like you're doing more than that.
No, that's 10 hours.
Right. I was gonna say that's not even that many hours of discovery. Like
the reason why I bring that up is the simple fact that there's people out there that are building websites for $1,500, and then they're trying to figure out how can I go and like do discovery on a $1,500 project, and you really can't. You're essentially saying like, I'm going to use Built With to tell you that you're using WordPress. And
no, what they're going to say is their hour per dollar just goes down, and they don't even think about discovery being a cost to them in terms of time. They think about it, and often the client thinks about it in terms of proposal development. I'm going to go in and look at your code and stuff to figure out what I'm going to tell you to buy, and they don't think about it as its own cost.
Yeah, you don't charge for it, then the clients will just take it and go somewhere else and say, here, built this for me after you've spent 10 hours building the proposal.
But Jason, for those clients that are watching that, you know, that have that sort of budget, I'm going to give the free advice right now, right? Move to a managed WordPress host. No. No.
Do not.
Yeah. Move to a managed WordPress host. And if that's not a possibility, install WP Supercache. Like that's it. Or put Cloudflare in place. That's it. Right?
Managed hosting. Right. Go to a place like WP Engine or WordPress.com that gives you built-in support where you can talk to somebody and they will help you DIY, because that's a DIY budget where you're doing it yourself and maybe bringing in some people to help you.
We see this all the time in our meetups where you have somebody that shows up who's had 20 different developers. Maybe that all 20 people that are in the room have gone through this person, you know, to do all their stuff, and then they go like, I don't want to pay for discovery. And you're like, well, if you would have paid for discovery at the beginning, you would have found that all of these 20 different people that built their website, all these different ways, essentially have contributed to the issues that you're currently having.
Frankenstein.
Yep.
You know, maybe there needs to be like there's like CARFAX. There should be like WebFax, where it's like the web developers like leave a thing like there should be like that's a file in the code. Like here's the web.
Would we get a little mascot too? Like
there's a VIN. There's a VIN for the website.
Right?
So, okay, just one last thing.
How many crashes? How many times has this site been hacked? Like
we're wrapping up, but one last thing I really want to get in is we're talking about inheriting other people's code. This has been mostly inheriting other people's websites. There's also something where if a plugin seems like it's going to get abandoned or the person can no longer maintain it, it might get adopted or pass over to someone else. Recently, a lot of folks are aware that Alex Mills, who's been part of the WordPress community for well over a decade, has passed away. Mm-hmm. Automattic has an internal team, the Guardians, who is going to be taking over the majority of maintenance on most of Alex's plugins.
Regenerate thumbnails. Huge.
Yep, they're still actively using the WordPress community very heavily, and they're going to be taking ownership of those going forward, maintaining them so they don't just like fall into disrepair, link rot, and his legacy will live on.
Yay!
That's awesome.
Jason, I'm going to suggest that we have a part 2 on this topic. I mean,
Steve has more to say.
All we talked about is the onboarding process, right? Mm-hmm. I want to talk about what you actually do once you get once you have the code, right?
Burn it! Burn it!
I there's a lot more to talk about. I think we need a part 2 next week.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. We can definitely do that.
Let's do it.
Sweet. Well, I do want to let you folks know that if you go over to serverpress.com, they're the folks that sponsored this particular episode. And I want you to know that the stuff that they've been building over there is pretty awesome. And last week we did talk about WP Site Sync, which is just amazing way of being able to move content from one site to another, or from local to your
Like
state
Steve
team,
described.
or any of those sorts of things. So yeah, feel free to go take a look at that. That's over at serverpress.com. They've been doing some amazing stuff over there, and they've been helping us out with making sure that we keep the lights on over here. So I
We
appreciate
can help you do your discovery.
Yeah,
Hashtag,
definitely.
Hashtag do your discovery. I like that. I'm gonna go spread that. Mm.
All right, folks, you have a good one. Talk to y'all later. Go
Bye.
to WPwatercooler.com/subscribe. See you later.